to Reverse Engineering Wattpad. I'm Claire, that's Will, and today we have 3 amazing chapters for you guys, 12, 13, and 14.
That's right. So chapter 12 is The Carnival and the Compliment, 13 is just called Beautiful, and 14 is A Man with Pain. Now chapter 12, the origin of this chapter, when we were planning this out, if you've been watching, you may recall in chapter 7, they were at a party, and a community service fraternity guy tells Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire that she has brains and beauty, at which Ace scoffs. We decided that there should be a chapter that's just, where he's going to explain himself, and basically it's that, he scoffed because that guy wasn't really complimenting her. He just wasn't doing her justice, and then Ace will spend the entire chapter giving her a real compliment. That was the genesis of the idea. When we divided up the chapters for writing, I got this one, and I ended up having a lot of fun setting up the context in which he would give this true compliment. So it ended up actually being, I think, the longest chapter in the story because I just kept writing that before getting to the eventual compliment.
I also told Will that there was a limit on how long the compliment had to be, and I think it was like 2 pages.
And I believe it is.
It couldn't be shorter than 2 pages because I knew he could do it.
And I believe it is just about 2 pages. Now, the fun thing is Claire has not actually read the compliment just yet. Every other part of the story we reviewed and edited. She has not read this part, so today's going to be her first time. So what we're going to do is when we get to that part of the chapter, Claire's going to take over reading for Ace, and we're just going to see if she can get through it with a straight face.
I can't. Just thinking about it, I know I can't.
We'll see.
Okay.
It's pretty ridiculous.
That's why I made you write it. I knew you would be able to do it. Okay. Chapter 12, The Carnival and the Compliment. Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire's point of view. One of the best traditions in my town was the carnival. It came to town every year, and I went every year. My mom had first taken me when I was a little girl, and every year after until she passed away. The first time we went, I got really afraid because there were clowns. And clowns can be kind of scary, but Mom held my hand and promised me everything would be okay. So after that, I knew not to be afraid. After Mom passed, Grandma Rose took me every year. It was always a lot of fun, even if we always had to drive a bit to get there. It was closer to college than it was where I lived, so this year, it was within walking distance from me. Without Mom or Grandma Rose around, this time, for the first time, I was going on my own. I felt a little bit sad about that, but somehow it felt right. Grandma Rose had called to ask if I wanted her to drive back up this way to go with me, but after a long conversation and a lot of tears, we agreed it might be best for me to experience it on my own. That was why I hadn't asked anyone from school to go with me either, and also because Ace had never called or texted me since our date. And it had been a week!
Author's note. Seriously, such a guy thing to do. WTF? Frowny face, frowny face, frowny face.
I still got misty-eyed thinking about that conversation with Grandma Rose, but it was all okay, because she was going to drive up the next day to have lunch with me. I couldn't wait to see her. I was walking through the aisles of Kent, snacking on a bag of plain potato chips that I had brought with me. These multicolored, conical constructions of fabric were part of the fabric of my life when I thought about it. They were lit up with lots of lights, allowing their red and yellow colors to stand out against the dark of the night. And the smell of the animals in the petting zoo brought me back to happier times when Mom and I would look at them and pick out which one would be our next pipe cleaner project. In a clearing, there was a man in a big top hat with a cane calling out to the crowd of people as it walked by.
Step right up, folks, he yelled. Step right up and test your strength on the one, the only, High Striker. It was the game where you use a mallet to hit a button to send something up a tower to the bell at the top, and if you ring the bell, then you get a prize. I had tried it a few times when I was little, but I had never been able to get more than a quarter up the tower. Now I mostly liked to just watch people try it. I had never actually seen anyone ring the bell, and to be honest, I was not sure that it was even possible. The top hat man saw me and pointed at me with his cane. "You miss," he said. "Why not test your strength? Ring the bell and win a prize."
I looked down at my feet. "No, thank you," I said shyly. "I've never been good at this game."
"Anyone else, then?" Top Hat Man went on, spinning around. "Are there any challengers out there, brave souls willing to face the High Striker?" "I'll do it," said a voice from behind me. I turned around and saw that the voice belonged to Aiden, a boy from my English literature class with Professor Doggett. "A challenger!" cried Top Hat Man. "Yes! Step right this way, sir." Aiden looked at me before he walked over. He had wavy mahogany hair, brown eyes that stared into you with a striking intensity, and some of the broadest shoulders I'd ever seen. "I'll win this for you, Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire," he said, starting to walk over to Top Hat Man. "Like hell you will," said another voice. I looked over. This voice belonged to Parker, a boy from my Spanish class. He had blonde hair that was even wavier than Aiden's, with blue eyes that looked like the bright sky on a cloudless day. And he was really tan because he was on the track team and spent a lot of time outside. "I'm winning this for Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire," Parker said, stepping in Aiden's way. "Were two boys really about to fight over me?" "Back off! If anyone is going to win this for Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire, it's going to be me," said a third voice. Top Hat Man, Aiden, Parker, and I all looked at the third voice. It belonged to Jesse, a boy from my calculus class. Jesse had long hair that was black like the nighttime reflected in a still pond, brilliant green eyes that darted around like a cat's, and you could always clearly see the outline of his pecs through his shirt. The three boys all started kind of posturing against each other, pacing around in a circle and trying to stare each other down. I couldn't believe it. What could they possibly want to fight over me for? "Well, isn't this magnificent?" Top Hat Man called out. A crowd started gathering around, watching as the spectacle unfolded. "A truly unprecedented event. We have not one, not two, but 3 challengers for the High Striker at the same time. And the prize they shall compete for?" He pointed his cane right at me. "The lovely young lady right there."
My eyes must have grown as big as the moon. What? I stammered. "What do you mean I'm the prize? Don't I get a say in this?" I felt like an object on display. It was kind of offensive, but at the same time, I couldn't help but blush over the fact that 3 guys were competing over me at the same time. I wondered who was going to win. Aiden went first. He swung the mallet down as hard as he could and got the ball about halfway up the tower. Parker and Jesse started mocking him, laughing really hard.
"You loser," Parker said, taking the mallet from a red-faced Aiden. "Why don't you step back and let a real man show you how it's done?" But Parker could also only get about halfway up the tower. He looked completely shocked. That left Jesse. He picked up the mallet, but before he swung it down, he flipped Aiden and Parker off, and then winked at me.
That was kind of mean, I thought.
Jesse swung the mallet down, and just like Aiden and Parker, he only got up the tower about halfway. The crowd started murmuring. Even Top Hat Man looked like he didn't know what to do. I heard people in the crowd arguing over who had got highest up the tower. "It was obviously the one with those great shoulders," I heard one girl say.
"No way, it was the one with that dreamy blonde hair," said another.
"Both of you are morons. It was definitely the guy with the pecs. God, he could ring my bell any time," said a third.
Top Hat Man finally raised his hand to quiet everyone down. Then he looked at me.
"Well, milady," he asked, "since we are changing the rules slightly to allow 3 challengers to compete for the same prize, perhaps we should allow the prize herself to decide the victor. Who do you believe was the winner?"
Everyone got really quiet and looked at me. I felt myself blushing all over again. I said, not sure what to say.
"None of them won," said a voice from behind me. Everyone turned around at the sound of the voice coming from the back of the crowd. People parted ways until the person the voice belonged to was visible. It was Ace! Ace walked into the clearing in the middle of the crowd, looking right at Top Hat Man. "But I will," he said. The whole crowd started murmuring again. Who was this mysterious new challenger? A fourth challenger, Top Hat Man said, looking confused. Well, if the lady allows it.
Top Hat Man and the whole crowd looked at me again. The last person to turn his gaze over to me was Ace. We locked eyes for it felt like a long time. And then, without saying a word, I felt myself quietly nodding my head. Why did I do it? I don't really know. I was kind of mad that he never even texted me after our date. Now he just shows up at the carnival to try and win me as a prize. But I was so mesmerized by the determination in his voice and the sharp look he was giving me that I felt powerless to resist. Ace walked over to the mallet. With one swift motion, he raised it over his head and brought it right down on the button. Ring!
Ring!
Ace's strike went all the way up the tower and hit the bell. I couldn't believe it. Ace casually tossed the mallet to the ground, then scowled at Top Hat Man.
I trust that settles who the winner of this contest is, he growled.
Top Hat Man, mouth agape, could only nod. Ace then turned in the other direction, to where Aiden, Parker, and Jesse were standing. He gave them all a look like, want to try challenging me? Aiden, Parker, and Jesse all looked down and stepped back. They weren't going to challenge him. He had won. I stared at him, mouth open even wider than Top Hat Man's. Ace walked over to me, looking me right in the eyes.
Let's go, he said.
I could only nod. He took my hand in his and led me to the edge of the crowd. They all parted ways again, and we walked through them, leaving them all behind. Ace was leading me through the aisles of tents at a really brisk pace, still holding my hand. Ace, I said, stop. He stopped and turned to look at me. I took my hand back. Just what do you think you're doing? I asked, putting my hands on my hips.
He smirked. Taking my prize. I just won you. I own you now.
I huffed really loudly. You most certainly do not, I said. You haven't even called or texted since our date. How do you explain that?
Ace looked down, looking kind of ashamed of himself. I'm sorry about that, he said. I don't really go on real dates that much. I wasn't sure what to do.
Well, maybe next time you could try calling or texting, I said, crossing my arms.
He looked up and the smirk was back on his face. So there's going to be a next time after all then, he said.
I gasped. Had I really just said that? I was supposed to be mad at this guy. I stammered, trying to maintain my composure.
In a quick motion, he put one hand around my waist and drew me in really close. I felt all of the breath leave my lungs. It was all I could do to keep standing. I felt so weak in the knees, but somehow I knew that even if I did start to fall, Ace would catch me. Don't fight it, Rosie, he said, looking right into my eyes. You know you want there to be a next time.
I wanted to say something back, but I couldn't because I still hadn't gotten my breath back. But I didn't need to say anything. He was right. I did want there to be a next time. He took me by the hand again and led me away, going at a slower pace that I could keep up with it this time.
And after next time, I definitely will call or text, he said.
Well, that's a start at least, I said, still trying to focus, though true how lightheaded his touch made me.
Only a start, he said, giving me a mock-hurt look. Well, maybe I can get a bit further with this. He led me to one of the tents. It was for the game where you throw a ball to target to drop a person into a vat of water, and if you do, you win a prize. He quickly paid the guy in charge of the game to play. The person sitting in the chair above the vat of water started taunting him. "Ha! You'll never hit the target," he said, laughing a lot. I really didn't like him for being so rude. I stuck my tongue out at him. Ace didn't say anything back. He just had the same smirk on his face. He looked over at me. I must have had a worried look on my face because he winked at me for reassurance. Then he wound his arm back and threw the ball at the target and hit it right in the middle. "What?" yelled the guy as the chair gave way beneath him. Splash. He came up spluttering. "Why, you—" He tried shouting at Ace before he slipped back under the water. "Glub, glub, glub."
I love the gloves. Ace and I both laughed really hard.
"And what will your prize be?" said the guy in charge. Ace immediately pointed to the top shelf of the prize selection. "Excellent choice," said the guy. He reached up and pulled it down and handed it to Ace. Ace immediately turned to me and handed it to me.
I couldn't believe it. It was a giant stuffed giraffe. Oh my god, thank you, thank you, thank you, I said, taking the stuffed giraffe from him. I tried to give him a hug, but it was a little hard with the giant stuffed giraffe between us. It was so big I could barely hold it. Ace laughed as I tried to get it in a good position.
"Why don't you let me carry that for you, Rosie?" he said. I was so happy in that moment I didn't even mind that he called me Rosie. Ace could lift the giant stuffed giraffe with just one hand and put it on his shoulder to carry.
I guess that makes sense for someone so strong he could ring the bell on the top of the tower, I thought. We kept walking through the carnival. What should I call the giant stuffed giraffe? I asked.
"What do you mean, what should you call it?" he asked.
Every stuffed animal needs a name, silly, I said. Do you really not know how this works?
He got quiet for a moment. "I never really had any stuffed animals growing up," he said.
That's so sad, I said, stopping him and looking into his eyes. Did you have any toys?
He thought for a moment. "When I turned 10, my dad got me a shot glass," he said. "Then he made me do a shot with him. He said that if I was old enough to have the same number of digits at my age as him, then I was old enough to drink. So I took the shot, but it really burned and I coughed it up and dropped the shot glass and it broke on the floor, and he said if I didn't appreciate the gifts he got enough to be more careful with them, then he wasn't going to get me any more gifts for future birthdays, and..."
That's horrible, I screamed, wrapping my arms around him as tightly as I could. What kind of a gift was that? You were only 10 years old.
Well, 10 and a half actually, because he had forgotten my birthday when it really happened, so...
Stop! I cried. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
"I don't know if it was really that horrible," he said. "I mean, it toughened me up."
I pulled away from him, wiping tears from my eyes. He looked like he really couldn't understand what was so bad about that. I took his free hand in mine. You don't need to be tough with me, Ace, I said. You can just be yourself. I appreciate you for who you are.
"And who is that?" Ace asked, sounding a little defensive.
Ace Pike is a good person, I said. Strong on the outside, sure, but I moved my other hand to his face, touching his cheek. Really sweet on the inside.
He looked away from me. I would have given anything to take away the pain I could see in his eyes. "Well," he finally said, "it's all in the past now." He looked back at me and the smirk was back on his face. My heart melted a little. We kept walking through the carnival. So is that why you do the things you do sometimes? I asked, because you think you need to be tough? "Like what?" he asked.
Well, I said, how about, for example, the community service fraternity party we went to? When that one guy said I had brains and beauty and you laughed? What was that about? I turned to him with my hands on my hips, remembering that I'm still kind of mad about that.
He turned to look at me. His eyes bore into mine with more intensity than I had ever seen in anyone's eyes before. I felt my own hard gaze withering away under the strength of his, and my hands slowly slipped off my hips until they dangled at my sides. "I was mad about that too," he said after a long time. You were mad? I asked, not following what he meant. Why in the world would you be mad about that? "Because that guy was insulting you," he said. I don't know where you're from originally, but where I come from, saying that someone has brains and beauty is a compliment, I said. "No, it wasn't," he replied, a bit of an edge in his voice. "That guy was insulting you. Brains and beauty? That doesn't even come remotely close to doing you justice." Well, I think that... What? I said, really confused. "You heard me," he said, taking a step in closer. "It didn't do you justice. And you don't do yourself justice either, like when you said that you looked like a nightmare," he said. "I promised you I'd tell you what I was about to say in response to that, didn't I?" he asked. Yes, I said, my knees beginning to tremble. "Well, I'll tell you now," he said. and it's the same reason I laughed when that idiot at the party said you have brains and beauty. He took a deep breath.
Whoa! I've never seen him take a deep breath before, I thought.
All right, and it is time for the compliments.
I'm like actually feeling the excitement in my body.
Oh boy.
Gotta get all these stuff. You can't let there be any confusion for who I'm playing.
I got it.
Rosie, you aren't just beautiful, he said. You're more than beautiful. The only thing wrong about that is that there isn't a word in the English language to describe just how much more. Is there a word that combines beautiful, stunning, cute, gorgeous, and radiant? I don't think there is, so I'm gonna make one up right now.
He thought for a minute.
Fuck off. Wait. Beautistun cut Gordient. Is that close?
That'll do.
Okay, he finally said.
My knees were about as wobbly as a chair on an uneven floor.
Oh God, I have to say it again. You are so beautistun cut Gordient. Your beautistun cut Gordience puts the beauties. No. Beauty skunk cut Gordience of anything else on this planet to complete shame. You defy all the previously highly held standards of beauty by making them hideous in comparison. I used to read a bit of Shakespeare when I was younger. He looked away for a moment, pain coming back into his eyes, until my dad took my completed works of Shakespeare away because he said that no son of his was going to grow up reading stupid poetry. But I still remember some of it. There was this one piece. It began something like...
He turned his eyes up to the sky as though searching into them for a truth he used to know.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
He shook his head, returning his gaze to me.
I can't remember the rest of it, but I would be an absolute fool to try and compare any selection of hundreds summer days to you, Rosie.
My knees finally gave out, and I crashed to the ground, completely overcome by the romance of the moment. He stood over me, still going on.
The real tragedy of human history is that the rest of the world is going to go on thinking that William Shakespeare was some profound writer who could find beauty in anything, but I know beyond any doubt that he was just punching above his weight class. How could he be a good writer when he never had a chance to see true beauty? Beautistun cut Gordience. How could there have ever been any writer who lived, who knew the first thing about beauty? All the famous names we cherish in academia, I like that that's the word that trips me up. And none of them had the first clue, because none of them ever had a chance to meet you.
I writhed around in the dirt, trying desperately to get myself upright again, but I couldn't do it. I thought my heart honestly might beat completely through my chest and not stop, but rather continue up through the planet's gravity and sail forever away into the vastness of space, fueled only by the powerful feelings I had for Ace right now.
I remember the first time I saw you, he said. You came in through the door to your room and saw me sitting on your bed. All I could think was that this angel in front of me was the most amazing creature on earth, and that I could spend the rest of my life looking for something that comes just a little bit close to approaching how perfect you were, and that if I lived to be 1,000 years old, I would never come close.
Ace, I said. Ace,
He said, bending down on one knee and putting a finger in my lips. Please, let me finish.
I nodded.
I know I'm the nicest person to you, he continued, But what you failed to realize is that I was acting the only way that I possibly could. The only way any reasonable person possibly could. What a bunch of complete fools the rest of your friends are, treating you decently like they do. Do they seriously flatter themselves into thinking that they're anywhere close to being on the same ground as you? That they're worthy of you? You are the living embodiment of human perfection. Compared to you, we're all nothing but foul beasts, so that's how we must act.
He stood back up, turned his head up to the sky, and began howling at the moon.
What? You sing One Direction songs, it's okay, I can howl. I can't do it. I can't. Thank God I'm home today. He cried, looking back down at me. You see, Rosie? That is what we're all reduced to when we are standing right in front of your beautiful gorgeous. Oh no! We are horrible shadows who dare not turn our eyes upward to your elevated state for fear that we might be completely illuminated into nothingness.
My entire body had gone limp. I couldn't move anymore. I was so caught up in how romantic his words were. I didn't even notice the sharp rock that I had landed on digging into my back. And even if I did, I don't think I would have cared.
But that fear is something that anyone with half a brain would be more than happy to live in, he said. Because when you find the most perfect creature on the planet, how could you not want to be as close to her as possible, even if doing so meant living in fear of your life? I can't possibly think of a fairer trade.
He got on his knee again, looking right into my eyes.
And as for your brains, you're pretty smart too.
He was finished speaking. I continued struggling to sit up, but couldn't do it. I used to think that I knew what true love was, but I realized in that moment that I hadn't had the tiniest idea until I met Ace Pike. Ace, I whispered.
Yes, he asked.
I can't move, I gasped.
Then let me help you up, he said. Then he picked me up and put me on his shoulder. The giant stuffed giraffe still on his other shoulder. We all left the carnival together.
Wow, it was just really romantic.
Oh my God! I was laughing so hard I started tearing up at some point there, but I pushed through.
Well done.
I really like it when he's like at the sky. That was fun. Okay. I'll put Will an author's note for you.
All right, chapter 13, beautiful. Author's note. Hey, so I'm sure you all not seed I didn't make any comments of my own last chapter. It was just a really emotional chapter for me, and I wanted to just experience it and feel it for myself, as well as the rest of you. So I just sat down plus wrote it straight from de heart, and I really hope it meant as much to all of you as it did to me. And thanks to you all so much for reading. I hope you all keep reading. I heart you all! Exclamation marks and ones.
Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire's point of view. Okay, perfect. Ace drove us to his place as the compliment, too beautiful and personal to repeat here, played over and over again in my head. As we drove, he put his hand on my leg, and I almost told him to move it, so we wouldn't crash. But I didn't and allowed myself to enjoy his touch. Over the speaker, Night Changes by One Direction played softly. I knew there was a possibility that we were going to sleep together. I could feel it in the air. If I slept with him, would people find out? If they did, would I be called names way too misogynistic to pass through my feminine thoughts? If I didn't sleep with Ace, would he think that I didn't love him? Would the relationship fall apart? Am I in love with Ace? I wondered. I looked at him. Do I want to sleep with him? If we went halfway, would it show that I loved him? Or would he think I didn't love him enough? I haven't even kissed him yet. If we don't do anything, will there ever be a chance again? This is a hard decision.
What are you thinking about? Ace asked, pulling me from my thoughts.
What if he doesn't actually love me? Oh, nothing. I hope the darkness of the car hid my blush. But that compliment, it was too perfect for him not to.
Ace patted my leg. We're almost there.
Hurry up and decide, Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire. You don't have all night. When we pulled up to Ace's, I still hadn't made up my mind. I didn't know if I was reading too deep into it either. What if I was reading the mood wrong? I've never been in this situation before. Mom, tell me what to do. Ace led me to his dorm.
Ace led me into his dorm room. I didn't know what to expect. His bed was pushed against the far wall. The dark blue sheets looked like they had been kicked off in a hurry. On his bedside table there was a lamp that Ace turned on, and I could see his room much better. He had a bookshelf along one of the walls. I made my way over to it and touched the worn spine of a book called Magic Tricks for Newbies. My mom got me that book when I first got into magic, Ace said, coming up behind me. He stood so close. I could feel his breath on my neck. I was getting goosebumps from how close he was. I looked at the book next to Magic Tricks for Newbies and saw my favorite novel of all time, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I let my fingers run over the worn spine, my heart swelling in my chest.
Whose book is this? I asked, not believing this could belong to Ace.
Mine. He reached past me to pick up the book and handed it to me. Pick a page, he said really casually.
I opened the book to where one of my favorite passages was and told him the number. To my complete shock, he started reciting the page from memory.
There are few people whom I really love, and still fewer of whom I think well. The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it, and every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human character, and of the little dependence that can be placed on the appearance of merit or sense, he finished reverently.
My heart just about burst out of my chest. You memorized the book? I asked, mouth agape.
He looked at me solemnly. I memorize every book I read, he said quietly.
My eyes grew wide. Ace was so much deeper than I had thought when I first met him. How could I have misjudged him so badly?
You have beautiful eyes, Rosie. Ace stepped closer, then reached up and pressed his hand to my cheek.
Oh my God, it's happening. Could he feel my heart too? I wish they were both blue, I said sadly, like my mom.
Ace ran his thumb under my green eye. He had a soft smirk on his face. I think they're both beautiful. He leaned in a little, and my heartbeat quickened.
His lips touched the skin where his thumb had been. They were softer than I expected. I closed my eyes, waiting for him to kiss me, but he didn't. Ace? I opened my eyes. He was much closer now.
Didn't you hear my compliment? Ace leaned in and kissed the skin beneath my eye again. My heart fluttered at his touch. I felt his lips leave my skin before reconnecting on my eyelid. His touch was soft. I put my arms around his body as his tongue poked out and ran along my eyelid.
I opened my eyes, and his tongue made direct contact. I blinked, unable to help it, as he ran his tongue along my eyeball. The feeling was strange, new and exciting. It awakened something deep inside me. Never have I suspected kissing could be so good. Ace groaned and pulled me closer. His lips crashed into my eyeball again with more heat, more passion. I never realized someone could kiss like this. When he stopped kissing me, I had to blink to regain my vision.
That's what makes you beautiful, Rosie.
It's Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire, I said. Ace smirked and started kissing my eye again. This time, I welcomed his touch with excitement. Never did I think someone would love what part of me I found most repulsive, but here he was, Ace Pike. He turned his head, his lips closing around my eye at a new angle. I couldn't help the soft sounds that escaped my lips. I was blushing so hard. Ace pulled me closer to him and put his hands on my hips. He lifted me up and I wrapped my legs around him, my arms snaking their way around his neck.
Rosie, Ace breathed against me.
I couldn't correct him. My mind was a puddle. Ace walked towards his bed and set me down. His lips left me once more. I blinked. He looked at me and tilted his head, his hands resting on my cheek again. I felt a stirring in my stomach as he looked at me. I wanted him closer. In his arms, I felt safe and protected. I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. Ace pulled me closer, his fingers running through my hair. His lips found their way back to my eye, and just like that, I knew I was ready for him to take me.
Oh, so romantic.
I've read that chapter a lot just so I could read it without laughing. Because I really wanted to do that. It's very hard practicing when you're alone in the car with your mom. But you know. Chapter 14, A Man with Pain.
Author's note. Hey everyone, OMG, I'm so sorry I haven't gotten a new chapter up faster. I know you all really wanted to see what happens after the last chapter, but I've been so distracted because Brittany told Amy that Tiffany likes Colin, but Amy has had a crush on him like forever. So she told Megan that Tiffany likes Brendan because Megan is such a gossip that pretty soon the whole school knew, and now Colin won't talk to Tiffany because he says it feels weird, so Tiffany is mad at Brittany. So she told Joseph that Brittany cheated on him with Alex, which she did, but Joseph didn't know and now he does, so he asked Amy out to get back at Brittany, and I have had enough drama! So here's chapter 14, A Man with Pain.
Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire's point of view.
What's this? Ace asked.
The lights were out, and we were lying in his bed together. We had just slept together, and I was turned over on my side away from him, a million thoughts going through my mind. He shuffled up behind me, his hand running down the side of my body. It stopped at the birthmark on my hip.
What's this? He asked again.
That's my birthmark, I said quietly. He got quiet, probably from getting a closer look at it.
It looks like a sapphire, he finally finished.
I know, I replied. That's where part of my name comes from.
What do you mean? He asked.
Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire, I said. I turned over to face him. My mom gave me that name.
Oh, I didn't know, he said.
Rosalind, in honor of her mother, my grandma Rose, I said. Jasmine, because when I was born, I was so pure that I smelled like jasmine. And Sapphire, because of the sapphire-shaped birthmark on my hip. I felt myself starting to cry. She was my best friend, I sniffed. And then she died of 37 different kinds of cancer. Breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, 35 other kinds too.
And that's why you don't like people calling you nicknames, he nodded, finally understanding. I'm sorry. If you like, from now on, I'll call you Rosalind Jasmine Sapphire.
No, I said, putting my hand on his chest. Call me Rosie. I hesitated. You were right, Ace, I said. I love you. You really are magic.
Author's note. Aw, she would only let someone she really loves call her anything else. He pulled me in close. Rosie, he whispered in my ear. He touched my birthmark again.
Why do you keep touching it? I asked.
Because I love all of you, he said.
I fell asleep with my head against his shoulder. When I woke up later, I was alone in the bed. I pulled the covers up to myself and sat up, looking around for Ace. I saw him sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to me. I cuddled up to him. Ace, I asked, is everything okay? He was quiet for a minute, not responding. Ace, I asked again. Ace, talk to me.
Don't worry, Rosie, he said. Go back to sleep.
No, I won't, I said, coming up to a stop right behind him. Is something wrong?
It's just what you said earlier about your mom dying, he said.
It reminded you of your mom, I said, nodding. You mentioned that she died the same way. He still didn't turn around. He was quiet for a really long time, like probably 2 minutes. I tried to read his expression through the back of his head, but I couldn't. When he finally spoke, it was in a really pained voice, and by the time he was done, I felt like I understood so much more about Ace Pike than I had before.
My mom was the one who got me into magic tricks when I was a kid, he began. She taught me how to do all of them. The pick a card trick, the pull a quarter out from behind someone's ear trick. Her favorite was the one where you pull something out of a hat. That was the one she spent the most time teaching me, and I would always do it as often as I could for her because I knew it made her happy. I was always known at school as the magic kid, he went on. I was way better at it than anyone else, and when I was 12, I decided to put on a magic act in the school talent show. I saved up my allowance for 3 months to go buy a magician's outfit that I could wear. I was going to impress the whole school, and most importantly, I was going to impress my mom and my dad.
His voice was straining. This must be a really hard story for him to tell, I thought.
But then Mom got sick, he said. I remember standing next to her, bed in the hospital, crying. But she looked me right in the eye and she said, Ace, don't let this stop you from being as magical as I know you are. You go to that talent show and give the best performance possible. Of course, after that, I knew I had to do it for Mom.
His head dropped a little.
Dad was still supposed to come see me and record it so Mom could watch afterward, he said. I remember the night of the show, I was supposed to be the first person to go after the intermission. Throughout the whole first half, I kept peeking out from behind the curtain on stage, looking for my dad in the audience, but he wasn't there. I was getting really nervous. Where could he be? What if he missed it?
He shook his head.
During the intermission, I went outside the school, and that was where I found him. He was just getting there. He was a little drunk. I was mad at him for not being there. I asked him where he had been, and he told me he had been off with one of his booty calls. I didn't know what a booty call was at the time, but I knew it couldn't be good.
He started shaking a little bit.
I told him to just get in the gym with me so he could record my act and play it back for Mom later. But just then he got a phone call. I was trying to get him to come inside with me because the intermission was almost over, but he wouldn't move. When the call finished, he looked at me with a really sad look on his face. Ace, he said, that was the hospital. I'm really sorry, Ace, but your mom, she just died of 37 different kinds of cancer. Breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, 35 other kinds too.
I felt my mouth drop open in shock. What a horrible way to find out about something like that.
He kept looking at me, waiting for me to react, but I couldn't move, Ace continued. Ace, he asked. Ace, come on, son. We should go in for your performance. It's what your mother would have wanted. I kept standing still. He tried to nudge me along, but I wouldn't move. Ace, say something, he said. I hate you, I finally replied, really casually. It was the first time I said something really casually.
He got quiet again, for a moment before going on.
And then I punched him, he said. And then he punched back, so I punched back, and then he punched back again, and before I knew it, we were rolling around on the ground in front of my school fighting. That was the first fight I ever got into. In some ways, I don't think that fight ever stopped. Every fight I've been in since then has been a continuation of that one.
His shoulders were trembling. I put a hand on them, and suddenly I could hear something that was completely that completely stunned me, Crying. Ace was crying. I turned him around to face me, and I could suddenly see the tears falling down his cheeks.
Finally, some people saw us and pulled us apart, he said. I had to go back into the school, my magician's outfit all torn up and dirty from the fight, and do my act like that. I got through most of it okay, he closed his eyes. But when it came time for the grand finale, where I was going to pull something out of my hat, I couldn't do it.
He sobbed.
I just kept thinking that it had been Mom's favorite trick, and now she was never going to see it again, and I couldn't do it. I just stood there on the stage, everyone staring at me, and then he shuddered. And then I started crying right there in front of everyone.
I felt like my heart was just going to burst from how sorry I felt for him. I wiped the tears out of his eyes.
Finally, it took the principal, 4 janitors, and Emily Wilkerson coming on stage and hauling me off to get me out of there, he said. He looked to the side, remembering. Emily Wilkerson was the person scheduled to go after me. I guess she really wanted to do her hula hoop routine. I could hear the audience cheering for her as the principal and the 4 janitors carried me through the hallways and out of the school, kicking and screaming the whole way.
Ace, I'm so sorry, I said, pulling him in close. I felt him crying into my shoulder.
To this day, I still can't do that trick anymore, he said, sounding muffled. I haven't been able to pull anything out of a hat since my mom died.
Maybe I could help, I said, taking his hand and placing it over my heart. Maybe you could try to do it with me.
He shook his head sadly. I'm no good at it anymore, he said. It never works.
I wish there was something I could do, I said. Would it help if we slept together again?
He stopped crying a bit and pulled himself off of my shoulder. Yeah, that might help, he said.
I nodded, and we started kissing again.
Author's note, OMG, they are so in love!
And that does it for this week.
That does it for today. Heavy stuff there.
Really heavy. Man, I was smiling because I was so sad.
Yeah.
Some really great chapters.
That's what these stories do. They make you sad.
Yes.
So, tune in next time when we do chapters 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Yes, and also I forgot to say this at the beginning of the video, but in the description and in that little information icon in the side of the video, there's a link for the other, like a playlist where I'm putting all of the like magic videos in order so you can watch them in order if you come in late. I just keep forgetting to say it before you watch the whole thing. But yeah. Also, that compliment, Will. You could have prepared me for the howling.
You did it so well.
You warned me that you made up a word. But you couldn't warn me that I would have to pretend to be a wolf for a little bit?
No, I wanted that to be a surprise.
Oh, man.